Good day, everyone. For Telesur, I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas, Venezuela. We start off in Lima, Peru. That's where the COP20 climate change summit is coming to an end. Thursday is expected to be a very intense day of negotiations as the 195 countries participate in the conference have so far failed to reach a consensus on the final draft of a document intended to replace the Kyoto Protocol. Peruvian President Ollanta Humala addressed the summit on Wednesday, urging countries to consider the serious consequences that not reaching an agreement would have on the world and the environment. And while heads of state are meeting inside the conference in Lima, the People's Climate Change Summit took to the streets on Wednesday. Environmental activists are demanding the COP20 confront issues such as water shortages caused by mining and deforestation. The organizations also denounced several mega mining projects taking place in Peru and throughout the region. They urged countries to put an end to environmental destruction. We now go to Colombia, where on Wednesday, Colombians celebrated International Human Rights Day. This year, it also marked the restart of the 31st cycle of peace talks between the Colombian government and FARC rebels. Charles Parkinson reports.
The restart of Colombia's peace talks coincided with International Human Rights Day, celebrated in Bogotá with a ceremony in the city's Centre for Memory, Peace and Reconciliation. For Lars Vargan, ambassador to Colombia for Peace Talks guarantor nation Norway, this confluence highlights the central importance of defending human rights to establishing peace in Colombia.
This backdrop, this context is very important for Colombia. Colombia is part of the global community. We have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We have rights to concentrate on, and this should also be fundamental in the peace process in Colombia.
The event also saw the announcement that 8 million denouncements of victimization during the 5-decade conflict have now been registered, almost 1 million more than the number of registered victims, whilst almost 1 million murders have been catalogued. For human rights defender Ana Teresa Bernal, it's a statistic that carries great significance for the talks.
It means that the fundamental right of the victims is the right to peace. Without peace, we are not going to have a reduction in human rights violations, nor are we going to have a better life.
The restart of the talks saw government chief negotiator Humberto de la Calle speak out against misinformation being spread by those opposed to the peace, including a list of FARC demands which he said were false.
Those opposed to peace are promoting a march driven by hate and against the peace process. It doesn't surprise us that military intelligence, or sectors of that intelligence who are against the process, continue passing on information, true or false, to the Democratic Center Party and Senator Alvaro Uribe to try to destroy the peace process.
The teams will now get on with negotiations ahead of the arrival of the 5th and final group of victims taking part in the talks. The participation of the final group of victims offers hope that early in the new year, the two teams will announce an agreement on the difficult issue of how to deal with victims. Charles Parkinson, Telesur in Bogotá, Colombia.
In Mexico, the case of the missing students from the town of Iguala continues to attract headlines in the country, but also around the world. The country there in Mexico continues to attract headlines around the world. Earlier this week, U.S. President Barack Obama offered to send investigators to help Mexico solve the case. Support from the United States was requested months ago by President Enrique Peña Nieto, and it is not clear when the investigators are expected to arrive. Washington has been a staunch ally of Peña Nieto's government and has defended his administration. That's despite the nearly 10,000 people who have disappeared under his watch since 2012. And for the latest on the situation in Mexico and new forensic evidence that suggests the government's version of what happened to the students may be false, we go to our correspondent Clayton Kahn.
A group of scientists and forensic specialists from Mexico's National Autonomous University, or UNAM, and Metropolitan Autonomous University, or UAM, declare that their studies show that the story of the mass murder and incineration of the 43 Ayotzinapa students in a garbage dump in the community of Cocula, Guerrero, is very unlikely. The scientists affirm that the evidence presented by the Attorney General's office does not add up to the hypothesis of a mass cremation, as it would require nearly 30 hours and 33 tons of firewood to sustain a fire long enough. Last week, the independent Argentine forensics team confirmed that charred remains ID'd one of the 43 students, Alexander Mora. However, the team could not confirm where those remains were recovered, although the authorities declared they were found in that garbage dump in Cocula. These circumstances have fueled greater speculation, and now the parents of the students are demanding a search and investigation in military bases. This is Clayton Khan reporting for Telesur, here in Mexico City.
Thanks to Clayton. In Bolivia, a new government program is seeking to expand access to books across the country by establishing community libraries. Adult literacy students are one of the several groups specifically targeted by the new libraries, which include donated books covering a wide variety of topics. David Doherty reports from La Paz.
Community libraries of all sizes are popping up across Bolivia, many of them in places that previously lacked public access to books. Post-adult literacy student Beatriz Segarra says the new libraries are helping her and others to improve their reading skills.
It means
that the fundamental right of the victims is the right to peace. Without peace, we are not going to have a reduction in human rights violations, nor are we going to have a better life.
As part of the government program Bolivia Reads, the Ministry of Education hopes the new community libraries will not only benefit adult literacy graduates, but the general population as a whole.
Those opposed to peace are promoting a march driven by hate and against the peace process. It doesn't surprise us that military intelligence, or sectors of that intelligence who are against the process, continue passing on information, true or false, to the Democratic Center Party and Senator Alvaro Uribe to try to destroy the peace process.
More than 110,000 books were donated for the first phase of the Community Library Project in 2014, with at least 500 libraries already installed and many more planned for 2015. Reporting from La Paz, David Doherty, Telesur.
Thanks to David. We go to Brazil now, where the National Truth Commission has released its final report on human rights abuses carried out by the dictatorship which ruled the South American country for more than 2 decades. The report reveals and outlines the torture techniques that were implemented by the country's right-wing military dictatorship between 1964 and 1985. Over 400 people were either killed or disappeared by the military regime during that time. President Dilma Rousseff herself was tortured by the dictatorship. She received the recommendations of the Truth Commission, which advocate an end to amnesty for those who carried out the atrocities. In the United States, fallout continues following the release of a revealing report on the CIA's use of torture. The report describes the human rights violations carried out by the CIA in the years following the 9/11 attacks. The CIA responded to the report, claiming that the torture techniques led to valuable information. Despite the illegality of the techniques, the U.S. government has declined to indict any of those responsible for the acts. Concern is also growing over the case of 2 psychologists who helped design the torture scheme. The experts were paid $81 million over several years to design the interrogation program. And we move now to Ukraine, where the country is facing a deteriorating economic situation. On Thursday, Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk requested help from the international community as his country's economy is quickly heading towards a default. The Ukrainian economy has contracted 5.3% this year as Kiev pursues a costly war against Ukrainian rebels. And in Palestine, protests have erupted after Israeli authorities denied responsibility for the death of Palestinian Minister Ziad Abdul Ain on Wednesday. The minister died after being assaulted by Israeli police officers during a peaceful protest. According to the autopsy, the minister died due to the heavy intake of tear gas. Israeli officials reject the autopsy and claim that the minister died of a heart attack. And we end today in the United Kingdom, where hundreds of protesters have staged what they call a die-in at the Westfield Mall in West London. The demonstrators were demanding justice in the case of Eric Gardner, who was murdered by New York City police. At least 76 people were arrested at the protests. A wave of protests was sparked by the decision of a grand jury in Staten Island to not indict a police officer who choked to death the unarmed African-American man earlier this year. As always, we have more on those stories and others at our website. Check it out, telesurtv.net/English. For Telesur English, I'm Peru.